I now have the pleasure of introducing our keynote, JJ DiGeronimo. She's a tech executive, author, speaker, and businesswoman. She provides career and leadership strategies for high-impact women to effectively prioritize, align, and achieve their desired goals. She is the founder and CEO of Powerfull Woman and Tech Savvy Woman. She is the author of highly sought-after books for women, The Working Woman's GPS, Before You Say Yes. She also co-authored The Confident Woman, Tapping Into Your Inner Power. She's a global spokeswoman for women leaders, women in technology, women entrepreneurs, and young women in science, technology, engineering, and math. Her full bio can be found at purposefullwoman.com. It's a very great pleasure. I introduce JJ DiGeronimo.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. But I first want to thank RIT and Dana and all of the committee that has made this possible. Did they not do an amazing job? Such a good day. And I also want to thank all of you, because just chatting with some of the women here today, I know that many of you had second-guessed whether or not you were going to come, right? Some of you had got to-dos last night. Some of you got some additional to-dos while you were sleeping. And I'm sure some of you even thought this morning, do I even have time for this? Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but I know you're out there because I've talked to a couple of you. So I want to give you a round of applause just for showing up. I mean, really. This does not happen that often, where you get the opportunity to sharpen your own saw and really come and start thinking about not only what is happening up here in the breakouts, but also what are you thinking? What things are coming to mind for you? Where are areas you need to focus that maybe you have put aside or pushed in the back? And so keeping a short list of things that sort of pop up while you're here, because oftentimes those are indicators of things that you might want to look at over the next 30, 60 days, and keeping those notes. And I've seen many people jot things down on their paper. So hopefully you'll prioritize and take one or two things away from you today when you leave after lunch that maybe you didn't think about doing when you first got here. So I really encourage you to participate in some of the assessments that we're going to do today. I actually started my own personal journey of interviewing successful people, most of which are women, over the last 5 years. And that really took me down a completely different trajectory than I had planned, and really launched some of the books and webinars and videos that I do. And we're going to go through a couple assessments here today, but I just wanted to back up just a little bit, because I did not always, aspire to be right here, right now, but a series of events have happened that sort of have pushed me along the way. And when I was little, when I was about 12, it sort of dawned on me I wanted to have a birthday party. And most kids at 12 have a birthday party. They have pizza and makeup and all that stuff. But when I asked my parents for a birthday party, they said, well, we'd love to have a birthday party for you, but we really just don't have the money to have a birthday party for you. And at 12 years old, I really didn't understand about money and how things worked, and I really didn't know what that meant, but I knew for sure that I was going to make some money. Because it didn't really feel so good of not having any money. And so, at 12 is when I really started my own journey of working. I started mowing lawns and raking leaves and doing anything I could do just around my neighborhood, which then evolved into working at the bakery at Tops, and then I worked in retail at the Gap for 6 years, and then I started waiting tables. And it was just an entire process of getting out and working and making some money. So when I arrived at college, they asked me what I wanted to do for a degree. And I knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't really have real role models that really encouraged me, or we even did college visits or anything like that. And so I asked a couple of the folks when I first arrived, I said, well, what degree gets hired? And they're like, well, all of them. I'm like, no, okay, let me rephrase. What degree makes money when they get hired, in the degree? And, they're like, well, we have this computer thing over there that everybody seems to get hired, and they make, $25,000 or more. I'm like, I'll do it. I was like, that's all I need to hear, because I had waited so many tables and brought so much butter and salt and taken meals back. I was not waiting any more tables. I was like, I did it through college, but I was like, I am going to make money. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to worry about funds all the time. And so I'm going to pick my degree based on the opportunity. And little did I know in the early 90s that computers were going to take off like they have. But it really put me down this trajectory of pursuing a degree that was pretty much male-dominated, which I didn't mind too much, because it didn't seem to be that big of a deal when I was that young. It wasn't really a focal point. But as I got older, I became more aware of it. And I still worked 30, 40 hours while going to school. So it really kept me focused on studying, which was great because it sort of set up my work ethic early on. And I noticed early on that if you work often and you deliver results, people will recommend you. I'm like, well, this is a great concept. And so I was easily appointed for internships, and I received that first job right out of college, which was great. And I traveled around, and it was awesome. My 20s, I traveled all over the world installing LANs and WANs for various companies that were engaging in ERP systems and new wireless systems, which was awesome. And so I moved through my 20s pretty successfully. I was sort of checking the boxes of society of what I needed to do. And then as I moved into my 30s and started making more life decisions, those little things that you say yes to? Those little teeny things like, yes, I will marry you. Yes, we can have some kids. Yes, we can buy a house. I didn't really realize it at the time, but all those little yeses added up to a ton of responsibility, okay? And, I didn't really think about this because when you think about it as a girl, they tell you, okay, get your degree, get married, have kids, buy a house, get a car, do community service, be skinny, be happy. I was trying to do all these things. And the more I said yes and the more things I did, and I thought I was checking all the boxes that society was expecting of me, I was really exhausted. And what I had known to that point was if I keep working really hard, people will notice, and I can push through this. I can just keep pushing and pushing. Well, I was pushing myself right into a hole, and not one that anyone ever talked about, right? No one really talks about, so being up past midnight is fun when you're out with your friends, but if you do it continuously night after night because you have work responsibilities and home responsibilities, it's not that fun. It's not that fun. And so I had this, in my mid-30s, I just was, unloading the dishwasher thinking, this is not what I expected. This is not what I expected. This is so hard. This is so hard. I could feel the tears, right, coming down my cheeks saying, did I miss the Cliff Notes? This cannot be happening everywhere. Why are we doing this? This is not fair. And I'm looking across, I see my daughter, I'm like, gosh, I can't do this for her. If I'm going through this, she's gonna go through this. And so I decided to start a personal journey to figure out, what am I missing? Nobody told me how to manage this all, and it wasn't that easy, and I wasn't even that good at it, because the more times I said yes, the more exhausted I became, and I really didn't even like myself, and honestly, looking back at the people I surrounded myself at that point, they didn't really like themselves either, and so we were all kind of negative Nancys together. And so it just was a really personal time where I just started asking people, and once I started asking women, I'm like, this is happening to me. Is this happening to you? They looked at me like, duh. And I'm like, okay, what do you do about it? And so I started these conversations with women. I would start them in airports, in cabs, right? I'd start them in ladies' rooms, in conference rooms. I worked mostly with men. I work out of Silicon Valley the last 12 years of my career, so it's mostly all men. But once in a while, I'd get in touch with different women. I would start asking them questions. And then as I started asking women questions, it would just, it'd start off around the idea like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, really? Because I don't think it's fine. You can say it's fine, but I don't think it's fine. And then you'd ask them some questions. Well, how did you get over your first obstacle? Or what happens when you have to be at home and be at work? What do you do? And you start the questions. And then, oh my goodness, the floodgates would open and they would just start talking. And then I would schedule 30 minutes with them and we'd be still on the phone an hour and a half later. And I just realized that not a lot of people ask women, how are you doing this? Because I don't really know how to do this. And once you start asking them little questions here and there, it really starts to unfold. And so the Working Woman's GPS is a collection of stories, assessments, energizers that I gathered from all of these interviews. And what I'm going to share with you today are 2 specific assessments with the time allotted that we could go through that you can take a look at what you've said yes to and really make sure you're aligning to your best self. Okay, so we're going to start down that assessment path because it really is, it's really something that with my engineering background, nobody gave me this form, but after talking to all these women, I started to create my own form. And so if you don't have one, raise your hand, we'll get one to you. But most of the women that I talk to, even now at these conferences, there's just not enough time. There's just not enough time, and most women are working into the weekends, and so really, having some more time is really where women are focusing, and where I really work with women to say, okay, where can you find more things in your schedule so that you can be more productive, but also more focused and have some more joy in your life, okay? Because I have found that the more you say yes, the less joy you have, okay? I mean, I don't even use the word balance anymore because that word just drives me crazy. If anyone has figured out this balance thing, please come see me afterwards. Because I think there is no real balance. It's selective focus at the biggest fire drill, right? Or the biggest demand. And so really it's about finding moments of joy in the life that you created. And that means that you're enjoying the majority of things that you sign yourself up for. Which means that when you are looking forward to you're looking forward to doing it. When you're doing it, you're enjoying it. When you walk away, you look forward to doing it again. And so you're not running, and this is what I was doing. I was literally running from thing to thing to thing in my life, and there was very little joy. Very little joy. In fact, I was a little aggravated, usually exhausted, and not very happy. And so I found that I was on more of the empty most of the time, and I could not get out of my own cycle of doing this because I was taught to say yes. You say yes. And honestly, no one has ever taught me how to say no up to these interviews. Has anyone really taught you how to say no? No. So you say yes, and yes, and yes, and yes, and then you're up at midnight making brownies. Right? Because you said yes when were in the car line or when you were at the church. Oh, sure, I'll do that. Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's a problem. I don't like making brownies at midnight, I have learned. Or any other time for that matter. So it's really about getting more purpose in your life. And, I just want to get a poll. Think about yourself. Think about, just even in the last 30 days, now that we're out of the holidays, just 1 for yes and 2 for no. How many of you have sacrificed something about yourself because of all the yeses you've said? 1 for yes. Woo! Yes. So hopefully this session will really help you think about how you go about saying yes and no. And I have tried this several times. I've given it to hundreds of women, and I've gotten great feedback. So I'd love for you, feel free to ask questions and get engaged, and we're going to work through this worksheet. So one of the things that was very apparent to me when I interviewed these successful women is many of them wanted to move forward in their career. Many of them were looking for that next title. But when you really started to dig underneath, do you want the title of director? Do you want the title of vice president? Do you want to manage the project? They'd always say yes. And then I would say, why? Why do you want to do that? Well, because it's the next step, or that's what's expected of me, or that's the way I want to take my career. I'm like, yes, but why? Why do you want to do it? Like, what about it excites you? The women 9 times out of 10 would come back to, I want to have more influence or I want to have more impact. And when you think about yourself, think about what do you want to do over the next 12 to 24 months. And then ask yourself, why do I want to do that? And ask yourself, does it come back to, I want to have more influence, I want to have more impact? So just jot those down, maybe in the corner of the sheet or on your notepad. Just jot down a few things that you want to do. And really think about why you want to do them. Why is that important to you? And it could be personal, it could be professional, it could be something in your community. I mean, we're all starting from different points, and some of us might be very happy in the career that we're in today, but we want to do some other things outside of our career, make us more well-rounded, or even prepare us for the next step. Okay? And so the one thing, in addition to having more impact and influence, all of the interviewees really would talk about, you have to be laser focused because you have to have a few things that you really focus on. So whether it's you might have one initiative personally, one community, one professionally, maybe you have 2 professionally, 1 personally. It doesn't matter however you slice up the pie, but you need to have selective focus because really the more you say yes to more things, the more diluted, right? You're just diluted and you're not as impactful and influential. So really thinking about what do you want to do over the next 12 to 18 months and then making sure that you have a pinpoint focus. And this is super helpful when you're trying to pick what goes on your list and what goes off your list. Because if you don't have laser focus on where you want to go next, it's very difficult to figure out, should I say yes to this or should I say no to this? Okay? Because, and the goal is not to get to full. I'm not going to get up here and lie to you like, oh, let's all get to full. Let's do it. I mean, come on. We're not going to get to full, but the idea is that we get off of empty, right? We get off of empty, and to get off of empty, you have to spend more time doing things for you. Meaning the happier you are, the more energy you create in your own life, the more your little ticker goes up, to half full. And we're not asking for miracles, but we're just asking to get more selective focus in the right areas so that you can be more impactful and influential and have more joy in your life. And so just moving that needle is really important. And as Christina said this morning, I mean, one of the things that she did is she took a bunch of surveys, right? She did a bunch of career assessment tools to really figure out where she would align best based on what comes naturally to her. And we're going to talk a little bit about that through our first assessment. So the first assessment you have, you want to start on the commitment side. Now, when I was writing the book, we were in our third or fourth version of it, and I was working with the editor, and I was telling her about how, in my head, I decide if I'm going to do things. I check this box, and then I sort of build this chart in my head. And Deb said, no, I have no idea what you're talking about. She's like, you need to write it out. So I created these assessments in the book at the very end when we were putting it together. And it's funny because these are the most popular aspect of the book, are the assessments, because it really helps people get an idea of where they should focus their time. And probably like many of you, I've read so many books and I've traveled internationally, so I've listened to so many audio tapes and in my car. And, they're always like, oh, you have to be happy. You have to be happy. And you have to be living the now, and which is all great stuff, but I'm like, but how? Like, I want to know how to do that. Like, I get it, I'm bought into it, but I want to know how. And I really think these assessments help get you to that point. And so the first section of the assessment is commitments. And I can give you the link to download this if you want one to take forward. This is something I keep in my folder as I go to things, and it's great because it keeps me, every time I take on a new project or I start a new initiative, I write it in the commitment column. Because essentially the commitment column is what you have said yes to. So all those little yeses you say, oh sure, I'll do that. Oh yeah, I can do that. Oh yeah, I'd love to do that. Oh sure, I can take that. All of that goes in this commitment column. What are all the things that you've said yes to? Here's the scary part. If I did a survey, most of you have committed to more than 168 hours a week, which sounds great and noble, but there are only 168 hours in the week. So, when I first started this, I would make a short list because then I would group them in big categories like my work and my home. And then what I realized is that I had to spend more time breaking down what are the actual things I do in those big buckets to really get an idea of what I'm committing to in these buckets. And so, you're not going to be able to write down everything you do, but if you could just put a couple things down that you've committed to in the first column, just for just to go through the exercise so that as you're moving forward and after you leave today, you can think about how you say yes, what you say yes to, and what it aligns to. So just putting some big buckets of just your commitments down there. And like I said, the more detailed you are of where you spend your time, the more effective this can be for you. And you can add along the way as we're going today, because I'm sure more things will pop up as we go through these other columns. So the next section or the next column is the requester. And this is really important because even though many times the requester is you, there's some people in your life that ask a lot of you. And really getting an idea of where the requests are coming for. Who's really sucking up your 168 hours a week? So just write it down. Is it your boss? Is it your significant other? Is it your children? Is it you? Is it your mother? Who really is asking you of these things? And I added this in later because this person, the relationship you have with this person is important. And oftentimes, you are doing some of these things to get to that next step. So even if you don't love it, the requester is maybe your boss, and it aligns to where you're going next. So just understanding who is asking this of you. That's the same. Then you jump over to alignment. And I go to that one first only because, back to where you want to go for the next 12, 24 months, maybe 36 months, does this commitment align to where you want to go next? So yes, Y for yes, N for no. And this is where it gets pretty interesting, because what I find is that when we do these exercises in large groups, you have a ton of commitments on your list, and sometimes from the right people. But sometimes it doesn't align to anything that's of importance to you. And so many people are saying yes because they feel guilty or they feel obligated, and they're doing the task at hand, but it's sucking up those hours, and it's really not aligning to anything you want to do next. And so you really need to think long and hard of why you're doing that commitment, even though it doesn't align to anything, and doesn't need to be on your list, doesn't need to be in your schedule, or doesn't need to go to somebody else. Maybe you do it at a later time, or maybe you engage other people. So really thinking about your alignment, and is it aligning? And then the energy. When I wrote the book, it was much more business focused, the initial, and what I realized is that energies came into this so much more strongly than I ever expected. And I really didn't realize this, of how much energy affects things. And energy really is, do I enjoy doing this commitment? Do I look forward to it? Do I look forward to doing it again? And so, you can put a plus by it, a minus, or you're unsure. You need to inquire further. And I love this column, because this column, if you really are detailed of listing out your commitments and you really are honest about the energy that you get from this, it's pretty easy to identify what natural skills you have, because generally things that you do naturally well, you look forward to doing it. When you're doing it, you enjoy it, and when you walk away, you want to do it again. It's very interesting. And what I have learned from doing these studies with so many women is that the more they can get a plus in that column, the more pluses they can get in this column, the more joyful they are in their life, because they are creating a schedule of things to do that they actually enjoy. But if we spend our time filling the columns with things that we feel like we should do and that don't really align to anything and don't have any energy associated with it, we have a life filled of things that we're, these people? I was one of these people, right? I was one of those people that I did not enjoy the things I committed myself to. And not only did I not enjoy it, I was not happy when I was doing it. And everybody knew it, right? And when people knew I didn't like what I was doing, guess the type of people I attracted. You see how this is all interwoven? So once I started interviewing these women and sort of realizing this was all connected, I had some serious work to do. I really had to look at, okay, what am I saying yes to? Why am I saying yes to these things? Do I feel guilty? Do I feel like it's going to get me to the next level? Is it because some family member is asking me? And it really started to get insightful on my schedule and why it matters to where I'm going next. And one of the big aspects of this is, how much time does this commitment take? Because if I have this commitment and it's not aligned to anything, and I have a negative for energy, and it takes me 5+ hours a week, does it need to be on my schedule? Does it need to be something I sign to, right? So really thinking about this, I know, it takes some of the fun out of your everyday life, but the more methodical you are about what sucks up your 168 hours, the more effective and ideally the more influential and impactful you're going to be. And so when you really take the time and, now you at least are getting an idea of how to think about this. So maybe Saturday morning, another flight, a time where you can really sit down, or even carrying it with you and just jotting down the commitments every time you start a new project or a new initiative, or you're going back to something you've already committed to, putting it under the commitments and then going through the exercise to see. Now, I'm not suggesting you can go I'm not suggesting that you can go home and take all these things off tomorrow. That's not the idea at all. But the idea is to become, it's not working. The idea is to become more hyper aware of how you spend your time. So that you can be more cognizant of what you put on your schedule. And because nobody had ever really taught me how to say no, I had all kinds of things on here. All kinds of things. And so, you know, the tears at the dishwasher were because I got myself in so many situations I really didn't want to be in and that I didn't really enjoy. And I had to spend about 2 years digging myself out of situations that I had said yes to so flippantly, like, oh, sure, I'll do that. And then it's, you know, unlimited amount of time I've had to do this, and it was just continuing to drag me down. So this is just one of the charts. I have tons of them I've created over the years, but just a couple things I want to point out is you can group things in different ways, and we were talking last night, we had a great dinner with the committee, we were just talking about things to do, and you know, what's on your list, what things does your spouse do, what things do maybe you have girlfriends do, and it's interesting because a lot of things that I felt like I should do, like PTA for instance, right? There's a lot of moms part of the school, okay? But for some reason, they see me come and they go, oh, do you want to be on PTA? I think you would be great. You would be awesome at that. I'm like, okay, that small okay. Oh my goodness, it took me down a road that I didn't even think I could recover from. I would get stuck in these meetings that were supposed to be half an hour to 45 minutes. They would be an hour and a half. The first half an hour is fidgety, then 45 minutes I was like, after an hour I was angry, okay? So not only was it influencing my brand and like my disposition, but I just didn't really enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it at all. In fact, I dreaded going there. And I thought for a lot of people, that was their night out, or they enjoyed it. I already had 25 other meetings to go to that day. I did not need another meeting to go to, and not one that I dreaded so much. And so this was on my list for a while, and I didn't realize how much I dreaded it. And so it took me a long time to figure out to take that off my list. And I have to say, when I took it off my list, they practically gave me a gift to get the heck out of there. I was such a bad energy there, and I didn't even recognize it because I didn't want to be there. So thinking about what is on your list that you do, right? What's on the list that you do that you don't really want to be there? You're probably not as effective as you could be. And, you know, if you were like me, they would give you a goodbye gift just to get the heck out of there, right? So I wasn't adding any value. I wasn't adding the level of value I like to add because I felt so guilty that I should be doing it, and then I put myself in a situation that really brought out my worst self. I mean, I was beyond negative Nancy. I was like a practicing polluter. I was not a great thing. And so really thinking about what's on your list, and some of the things we talked about last night, I am not a gift getter. Like, going to Target, it's about 25 minutes from my house, and we have birthday parties out the wazoo. I mean, I'm starting a gift closet, but that takes a lot of work too. But I would say I try to find, if my sister-in-law's going, or one of the girls at the school, if they're going, you know, if I know there's some women that get out to Target a lot more than I do, sometimes I have them get the gift, I go in on them or ask them to get the gift. And because I have a job, you know, some of these women are home all the time and they don't have the luxury of having some extra funds. I actually give them $30 to go get the gift, and then they can get a pedicure or a manicure. And so I have found people in my network that I can either barter with. You know, I set up computer networks, so sometimes I'll go and set up their wireless network and they'll cook a meal. Or one of the girls in my neighborhood, she babysits once in a while for me. Well, one day she did, I asked her to do a load of clothes, and she's like, oh, I love to do laundry. I'm like, what? Like, come over here, what'd you say? And so now my babysitter, I'll get the laundry going, so I'll do 1 or 2 loads to get it going, and then she'll come over for 2 hours and we can knock out 4 loads of laundry for $16, you know? I mean, just thinking of ways that you can integrate people that you know in your network, find things they love to do, and see how you can exchange and barter. There's a lot of people that are in my neighborhood that, you know, don't love to work like I do. But they do love to cook, and they like to do flowers. My other neighbor, we bartered. Again, I set up a wireless network in their house with some security, and she did some potted flowers for me. I got all the stuff, and then she put them together. Again, something I'm not good at. I'm not a green thumb. But I know this about myself, and I've learned that I should align myself to things that I enjoy. And the things I don't enjoy, I should try to barter or outsource any chance I get. And I really, really have been adamant about what goes into my 168 hours each week. and if I don't really enjoy it, and if it doesn't going to get me to the next step, guess what the answer is? No! Right? Can you say it? No! No! But I don't say it so boldly. I really don't say it so boldly. Usually what I say is, well, let me get a little bit more information. What are you trying to accomplish? And in fact, there's many things you can ask yourself going into the discussion. I'll go through a couple things. But, there's a couple things I love to do. I love to mentor women entrepreneurs. I do love it. There's a group in town called Bad Girl Ventures, which is a really phenomenal organization. And the director called me and said, oh, you know what, I heard you'd love to mentor women entrepreneurs. So we have about 24 that go through each year. And we would love it if you could mentor them. I'm like, oh, that sounds great. What does that mean? I didn't say, I'm like, oh, tell me more about that. She's like, well, I was just thinking you could spend a couple hours with each mentor or each woman and mentor them on their business. So I'm thinking, 24 girls, 3 hours, 75 hours for, which is not ending because it's a whole year. So I'm like, yikes. I'm like, that is a great idea. That is a great idea. I said, but unfortunately I travel often. And for me to schedule 3 meetings, an hour each with 24 ladies, I'd have to get another assistant to help me just to get that scheduled in my calendar and their calendar. I said, but maybe what I could do is, I'll come and give a presentation. I'll come a half an hour before, I'll give the presentation, I'll stay a half an hour after for any questions, and I'll do that 3 times. You see what I just did? I just took a 75-hour ask and moved it into 6 hours. Right? I love to present, so it aligns to something I like to do. I enjoy doing it. I get a lot of energy from it. I get to mentor women, but I'm not doing it for 75 hours, right? I'm doing it for 6. And 6 hours, over 3 sessions that I can schedule myself. We can pick dates that work for me. So I feel like I'm giving and taking in my schedule rather than just coming outright and saying no, okay? Another thing for a fundraiser we were just doing in our community, they wanted me to participate on the committee. I was very aligned to the goals. I really loved it. But I have learned through my PTA experiences that I am not very good at sitting in the evenings with a bunch of women talking about whatever the goal is at hand. It's just that's not where I really excel. So I said, well, I'd love to join you. I can join via conference call, which wasn't an option, or I can take a small aspect of it and work on that particular piece of it. She's like, all right, I'll get back to you. So she came back a few weeks later. She said, we want to start taking payment through Square or some kind of mobile device. We want to take payment. Can you check out the different devices and see? So this is perfect because I can research it on my own time. I created a spreadsheet that said, okay, if you go with, the bank, if you go with Square, if you go with PayPal, this are your costs, this is what it's going to take, the equipment, the investment. And I was able to deliver value, something that aligned to something I like to do and knew about, but I didn't have to go sit in those meetings. Okay, I'm really not up for those meetings. So finding ways to do things and contributing in your own way that align to things you already like to do. Now granted, sometimes you're just going to have to say no. I mean, that just happens. Sometimes you're going to have to say no. But you can do it in a way that you can say, oh, you know what, I know somebody else that can help you, or maybe I could do it next quarter for you, if that's the truth, if you could do it next quarter. Just finding other ways to give them the ability to check the box they're trying to check, but not to put it on your list. Okay, this thing is very sacred. It looks pretty flimsy, but it is really your time. You are never going to find somebody that protects your schedule like you are. And if you don't protect it, nobody's going to protect it. And the 168 hours, you've got a lot to do in your lifetime. You've got to be very purposeful of how you spend those hours. So really thinking about it. And unfortunately, you think about the last 2 weeks of where you've spent your time. Where did you spend your time? And a year from now, if you spend it exactly the same way, where are you going to be a year from now? And is that where you want to be? Or do you need to mix some things up to get a little bit different results? So, one of the things that I really encourage you to do, because based on sort of the stuff in the beginning, or all of our ones, is that many times we schedule ourselves out. Yes? How many of us schedule ourselves out of our own schedule? I do it too. I've been known to do it depending on the week. Is really weaving in energy. And this is not necessarily, this does not have to be a spa day, right? This could just be getting through a hot cup of coffee in the morning, right? I struggle with that. I pour the coffee, I take 2 sips, and I go back, it's cold. I just get so caught up and it sits there and I have to walk out of my desk and come back. And so really weaving in areas of doing small things in your day that you enjoy. And this may be just walking outside, right? At lunchtime, spending 10 minutes of your lunch just walking outside and just checking out the trees and looking at the sky. Whatever seems to energize you, the idea is that you take some of the things that don't align to anything that is important to you and you weave in new energies. Things that you look forward to doing, that when you're doing it, you enjoy it, and when you walk away, you want to do it again. It's really important that you spend that kind of time, okay? So look down at your list. I don't know how much you actually have filled it out, but think about, just sort of look at it, and maybe the thing you didn't write it down, but maybe right at the bottom, something you can take off your list, right? Think about something just based on what I shared here today. What is something you can take off your list or work to take off your list? Okay? It's interesting because a woman probably like 3 months ago, she had a financial background. Her brother had an apartment complex, and he had asked her to do the books, and she had to have them done the last Sunday of the month, okay? And so after we had gone through this exercise, she came up to me and she said, "That's it, I've had it." You never know what women are going to say after that comment. You're like, okay. She said, my brother has me do these books, and the first Sunday of the month, I want to tackle it because I don't like doing it. So I want to at least get the process going. She goes, and it doesn't happen. The next Sunday comes. I think about it all weekend. I'm like, I got to get started on that project. And then she goes to bed that Sunday night. Nothing happens. And it continues on to the fourth Sunday of the month. And finally, at that point, she's already wasted the mental power every single weekend thinking about starting the process. She still hasn't started at 8 o'clock at night. It's 10 o'clock now. She's doing the books because it's due that night. She's like, I've been doing this for 5 years. She goes, I have not realized how much the energy it has sucked out of me for an activity that only takes 4 hours, but I dread it so much that it eats up 20 plus hours of my month because I don't like doing those 5 hours. And so I am going to go back to him and just say, I love doing your books. I want to help you, but I can't really do this anymore. I will help either split it with you to find somebody else, or I'll pay for a couple months until you get forward. She goes, it's that much worth it to me that I'd be willing to pay somebody a couple hours to do it, because it really takes up so much of my mental power and drains me every weekend that it's not worth it. And honestly, I never thought about things that way. Nobody ever taught me to think about my time that way. But I have to tell you, after speaking with these successful women and men too, is that they are very particular in where they spend their time and what they say yes and no to. So what we really talked about here is, what have you already committed to? Let me just go through a few things that may come your way later today, next week, over the weekend. I have in the book, The Working Woman's GPS, I have listed about 25 questions you should ask yourself before you say yes. And so I'm going to run through these. They're in the book. You can also find them online on Purposeful Woman. And then I'm just going to say a couple comments about the work environment. So people slide by. I love those flybys your desk, like, hey, would you just, right? Those would you justs can really get you in a lot of problems. Because it doesn't sound like a big deal, but honestly, people are usually asking you because it's a box they have to check. So instead of initially just saying, sure, right, because that's such a natural tendency of, oh, sure, I'll do that, or yeah, I'll take a look at that, or whatever, start to think about what's really being asked of you. What are they really asking you to do? So think about, do I understand how much work is ahead of me? What are their commitments? Could interfere? Is this aligned with my own goals? Is it going to help me get to the next step? Am I doing it for the right reason, right? Am I doing it because it's going to get me where I want to go, or am I doing it because I feel like I should, or I feel guilty, or this person peer pressures me into doing it? How will it impact the other things I've already said yes to? Right? Who else needs to be involved in this? What would success look like? I love this question because now this is a question I always ask is, well, that's a great activity or that's a great project, but what are you looking to achieve if I take this on? What do you want from me to do this? And so it's really interesting because you force the other person to sort of articulate what they want out of it, which may not align to what you were thinking about delivering at all. So again, it really sets you up for more success, if nothing else, if you choose to take it too, is really getting a clear indicator. And really, am I the best person? Or are you just the person that they walked by the desk first? Right? I've had a lot of situations come my way because I'm sort of closest to the coffee machine. And so people are getting coffee, and I'm like, that'd be a good idea. Hey, JJ. And then I'm just there, and I would say yes, and then I'd be up till midnight doing things that really didn't belong in my plate anyways. And so really getting a clear indicator of, should you be the person to do this? And I think as some of you mature in your career, you'll get more clarity on sort of where you're best aligned and who to do the work for and who not, because you kind of figure out who's going to be a sponsor for you and who's just wasting your time. But really asking better questions associated with what is being asked of you. Don't be so eager to agree without getting more information. And this makes a lot of people uncomfortable because, they don't want you to be asking them questions. Which, okay, that's fine, but I don't want it on my list unless I know what I'm agreeing to. And so having that confidence to ask more questions to be sure that it should even end up on your commitment. And what I have found a lot of times is that I wait 24 hours before I respond to most things. I mean, there's a couple things that are easy. I'm like, oh yeah, I'll do that, it's no problem. But most things, I would say 80% of the things that are asked of me, I think about. Because usually they catch me when I'm already working on something else. I'm really not thinking it through. And I really need to think about, okay, what is it that you need of me, and does it fit into my list? Because I've already committed to so many things. And one of the things I do at work, my office was in San Francisco, so I had a running list on my whiteboard. And so, because I was close to the coffee machine, they would come in, either my boss, maybe his boss, or an indirect person above me, next to me, and they would say, oh, can you just do this? And I'd start to ask questions and this and that, and inevitably, high-tech software company, everything has to be done this exact minute. So, that gets old, really old. So I would keep a running list in my office. I said, I could do that. I could do that. I can definitely help you do it. Once I went through all the things in my head, it made sense. I could do it. But what is something up here that we're either going to reorganize, put to the bottom of the list, or give to somebody else? This really catches them off guard. They're like, well, you just have to do it all. I'm like, well, I can't. So I cannot do it all at the same time. Like, you just can't. You only have so much time each day, and with all the conference calls and meetings. So it would force me to, with my executive, to say, what makes sense. And what I would find is some of the things on my list, he's like, well, why are you working on that anyways? I'm like, you came in here 3 days ago and gave it to me. He's like, oh, we don't need to do that. And so it was a running list of keeping track of exactly what I should be working on. And so it was a good feedback to make sure that I was aligned to the right place, and it also helped get some things off my list. And I do the same thing with my teams too. Like, we keep lists of what they're working on and what it aligns. And knowing your value, how do you align to the bottom line of the company? What value are you bringing through those projects? So making sure that you can articulate that back. I do a whole session on branding because I think women and branding and networking up, it's just such a big piece of the equation. But really knowing the value in these tasks. So if you do all these things, why does it matter to the company? Why does your role matter? And how is it going to help you get to your own desired next step? Okay? So this I have to put in there because this thing, honestly, no one ever talks about this when you don't have all these commitments. And I can't figure out a way to get rid of it. I just have guilt. Like, it's just the more effective you are in your life, the more people are gonna want you in multiple places, right? And so by being effective and impactful, you have desires and demands to do a lot of different things. And so you're always gonna be somewhere wishing or thinking maybe I should be somewhere else. And I try to minimize that, but inevitably you're missing a meeting this morning, you're missing some calls, maybe you have a project that you have to get right at and something else is gonna suffer. There's always gonna be this level of guilt. And so now I just embrace it. I really embrace it. I say, you know what, I feel guilty. I feel guilty, I really should be there. I really feel guilty. Instead of letting it control me, I acknowledge it. And one of the things that I thought was really cool, a woman that I interviewed, Kathy, she was a single mom. She had an international medical device business. She has 2 kids. She basically raised them on her own, and her job took her all over the place. And she said, it was really hard because I couldn't be at everything. And I know a lot of parents, men and women, right, want to be at a lot of the activities for their kids. But as you progress in the other areas of your life, sometimes you cannot be at every 4 o'clock game possible. And so one of the things that she did is she would sit down with her children after they got over 8. She said she'd sit down with her children and say, what are the 3 things you want me at this quarter? What are the 3 things you do not want me to miss? And so she would set up with her children an agreement that she was at those 3 things. But by doing that, she basically said, I'm not going to be able to be at every game or every event, but I will be at these 3 things. And I thought it was so interesting because, one, I was a new parent at the time and I didn't know you could have that type of conversation because my kids were little and there was no conversation. And so it was neat to know, and now that they're older, I can understand it, but giving herself permission to have that adult conversation essentially, or agreeable conversation with her children, that they set up expectations early on to have what she's going to be at and not. So even though she had guilt, she sort of picked and chose where she was going to be. Okay. So this is just, and again, if anyone's got this guilt thing figured out, call me. I'll give you my number. Just call me because I'd love to know how you do it. But I just embrace it because really it's just going to be there. The more effective you are, the more it's going to be there. Okay. So just closing up this section. I wanted to just get a show of hands. Thinking about your commitments, think about what we talked about. How many of you can offload or outsource one of the things on your list by 2014? One for yes? Yeah. This is awesome. And of course, I brought a little bit of tchotchkes because I always love gifts. If a couple people just share like what they're going to take off their list if they're comfortable, I will give you a charm. Yes, I'll give you guys a pass. Yes.
And then you try to take it on, and it ends up with a huge monstrosity in our house. And so I think I just need to do a better job getting them to follow through.
That is great. So she's going to take off the laundry and have her kids help more with the laundry. I started that too in my house. My kids are only 6 and 7, and I pile it up. I like dump it out, and then I have Hershey's Kisses, and I'm like, the first person done gets the first Hershey Kiss. The next person who folds their stuff nice gets the next Hershey Kiss. I make a game out of it, but I just can't keep up with the laundry all the time. Yes.
Well, now I am doing all the invitation for my ex-son that is getting married, and it's more and more and more jobs every single day.
You're planning a wedding, essentially.
Yes, but I am over with so many different activities. Oh, you're so creative. You have to do this. Oh, you look, the flowers are so beautiful. You have to do it.
Yes.
So I am done.
You get the default because you're so good at it.
Yes. So
Yes.
I am terrible from now on.
So she's the default right now. So her son's getting married.
My stepson.
A stepson, and they keep calling her saying, "Oh, will you do the flowers? Will you do the invitations? Will you do?" Because she's so good at it. So they compliment her and then drop some things on her list. That is a great one. Okay, over here.
Aside from working full-time, I also teach 4 dance classes and fitness classes. And I went to my boss and said that I'm done because I need to develop a more professional development. So I found the mother teachers, and after this May, I will no longer be teaching that art.
Oh, that's so great. So you're already working on it. So she's teaching dance classes, and because she wants to do more in her career over the next 12 to 4 months, she's decided to give up some of the dance. So you have to see how that works with the energy, like how much energy you get from teaching, and what are you going to put in that place so you can energize us, so you can create the same type of energy.
I want to focus more on professional development on myself.
Good for you, professional development. I don't know if you know of this website. It's I don't know if I'm going to pronounce it, but Coursera. Coursera, are you familiar with that? C-O-U-R-S. Coursera, yes. And so they have quite a few classes you can take for free. And I know they have one on leadership and emotional intelligence coming up on starting May 7th, something like that. It's a free course, and they do videos, and so it's a great way to just take a class at night, and you can do it in your own time. So anyone in the back of the room, I don't want to miss the back of the room. Yes, way over in the back.
I had offered to volunteer to help with a fundraiser for a not-for-profit, and as soon as I said it, I realized it was sucking my energy out, and it was asking me to do something I absolutely hate, which was manning food tables.
Yes.
As a result of today, I've decided I'm going to contact them and say, if you'd like me to take pictures at the event, I will do that, and I'll try to find somebody else.
Yeah, that's awesome. So she works for a nonprofit. They've assigned her to something she doesn't like, so she dreads it. So she's going to contact them and see maybe she can take on another role that will benefit them and try to help them to find, woo, that's great.
Thank you.
That is awesome. So you see how it works? It's just a trade-off. But again, giving yourself permission to realign to things that make sense for you. And so it doesn't have to be so harsh, but you do have to take control of your own schedule, because if you do not, nobody else will. So in the last few minutes, I just want to talk a little bit about people, because I mentioned it earlier on that when I wasn't feeling so great about myself, the people around me sort of felt the same way, and I was attracting essentially what I am. So I'm just going to spend a few minutes on your sphere of influence. And I'm going to speed through the first part because I want to talk a little bit about mentors and sponsors, especially from a professional standpoint. So, like I said earlier, when I was writing the book, I wasn't thinking much about energies when I first started, but when I finished, I realized that most of the book talks a lot about energies and the exchange of energies and the relationships you establish and the things you assign yourself to. And a lot of us have pretty curvy days. We have great things that are happening and then real low and then back high again and low. And so we're a little bit of an emotional roller coaster. And so trying to even that out as much as you can, it always helps. And so making some proactive decisions about who you're spending your time with and how you're spending it. And so the opposite side of the worksheet has a few columns, and it really talks about your sphere of influence. So I'm going to ask you a few questions. There's probably a couple ways you can do this. You could, for those of you that have smart devices, you could look on your favorites in your phone, see who are you listing as your favorites, who do you call on a regular basis. I'm going to go through these questions, just listing down the names, or if the person's sitting next to you, you might want to use initials, just in case, just a warning. But you can group it based on friends, family, coworkers, community, or you can just create a straight list right down on the side. So just think about who you'd call. You can write it down if you want. So if you received your promotion, who would you call? Some of these might get repetitive. Your company asked you to move to another office. You found out some bad news about a project that will, negatively impact the results or the timeline. Your house floods. Your animal's ill. You're asked to run for town council. You need to stay home from work for a few days, maybe because of family matters. You have somebody ill in the family, or you have a situation you have to stay home. Who would you call? Your kids or family or adults or significant other needs you to come home right now. If that's ever happened to you, you have to come home right now. Who would you call? You want to prepare for a new position. Now the reality is that this is your circle of influence, meaning these are the people that you would call. And the list could go on and on. You might add a few other people maybe that I didn't capture in these questions. But the idea is this is your support system. These are the people that really help you not only man the day that you have today, but where you're going next. And what I find with a lot of women is that there are relationships that they have carried for a long time, right? And the relationships have maybe not evolved at the same level that you have, or it has taken, or you've gone in one direction and they've gone another. And so when you look at your sheet, think about the energy you get from that person. Does this person support you? So under the energy column, think of the person, the next to him, be like, is this person supportive? Do they add constructive feedback? And will they help you where you want to go next? So whatever your 12 to 24 month indicator is that you've laid out for you in the beginning, will these people help you get there? If that is yes to all those, you put a plus by their name. If it's the opposite of that, right, they're negative, they pull you down, you put a minus. And if you're not sure, you put a slash. So just running down the list of names and just sort of getting a quick indicator. It's someone I get good energy from or bad energy from, or you're not sure, or it varies, it varies. And this is interesting because, when you're sort of in a state where you're drained and exhausted, your conversation isn't always as joyful as you want it to be, or as positive or excited as you are. And so a lot of times, you might not be creating the most advantageous conversation because you're exhausted and you're drained and you feel sorry for yourself. And so there's relationships that can definitely turn around. And then the next column is, will this person support me if I choose to do something different? So you know those relationships that sort of like you just the way you are, right? That person gets a minus on that column. And so will that person support me? Plus, obviously, for yes, and negative, minus for no. And the idea is that what I have found, not only in my own life, but a lot of women that I work with, is that we carry relationships with us sometimes way too long. And we give some people way too much of our own time, and their relationships that aren't really fostering positive growth. And so this part of the exercise is really just to think about, who am I surrounding myself with? Are they the best people to be really surrounding myself with? Are they going to help me to get where I want to go? And you know, some of that might sound a little selfish. So, you know, I have a list of people and different things that I've had to alter. And I've learned as I have started to advance myself, some of these people have fallen off naturally, and some of the people, you know, I just maybe don't have on my favorites as much anymore. But the idea is that you cannot change people, right? You just can't, but you can change how much time you spend with them. And this has been a lesson for me, because I carried some relationships, some of them from 3rd grade, that I really do care about the person. I just can't be calling them on a regular basis, because sometimes I get so excited about things happening, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, you're not gonna believe this. And they're like, you're not. Then you hear this silence, and they go, my cat died this morning. Or it's, I don't like my job at all. I hate my job. I don't want to be on this job. Or I don't like my husband or my kids. And then it just, whatever the comment is, it's like you just go, right? So your energy's real high, and then it just dives right down. And that's okay once in a while. And I even have a pact with some of my girlfriends. I'm like, we're going to just knock this negative stuff out for 10 minutes. I'm going to tell you all this crappy things that happened to me all week. You're going to tell me. We're going to put it in a box, and then we're going to get on to some good stuff. I mean, so you're going to have relationships where you have good stuff. But there are relationships, and many women have them, that their relationships are just, I mean, it is done. It is done in all senses. But, you know, it's not that you, well, let me just, do not, I have learned from experience, do not call this person when you leave here today and say, our relationship is done. I just went to this seminar, and this isn't working for me. Do not do that. It's not a good idea. But just mentally note, should I keep this person on my favorites button, or do I need to call them every time? You know, and the one thing that you really need to look at is that if you were on someone else's sheets, how would they rate you? Would you have pluses? Would you have minuses? Because whether or not you like to accept it or not, you know, you attract what you are. And I have said this multiple times today, that when I was in a not so good place, my network showed. And now that I have created more opportunities to get more positive energy in my commitments, aligned to the right things, I'm happier, I'm more joyful, and guess what? The people around me are happier and more joyful, because I attract what I am. And I just want to spend a few minutes, and I have a lot of information on the YouTube channel, JJ DiGeronimo, or Purposeful Woman, about mentors and sponsors. As we talked about a little bit this morning, these people are critical in your career. And when you think about surrounding yourself around people, especially if your 12 to 24-month desired trajectory is to get promoted or do something different, you need to find people in your network that are going to help sponsor you and get you there. And there's so many ways to do it. And I'll even post, I have an article coming out in Smart Business on this, so I'll send it to you, you can send it out. But about mentors and sponsors, I really talk about it as an advisory board of people. And there's just so much to be said for aligning to people that are going to help get you where you want to go. And it's very much a reciprocal relationship. But if you keep networking at the same level that you are, which Betty mentioned a little bit in the breakout session, a lot of women network like this, a lot of men network like this. You got to find something in between, right? Because people pull people up. And many times the jobs that people that are opening up, they discuss a short list beforehand of the people that are going to get promoted. You need some people in that meeting that are going to know that you're interested in getting promoted, so that when someone says, can you throw some names into the hat, you'll have some sponsors in that meeting that can put your name in. And there's a whole strategy around mentors and sponsors, but the idea is that you need to have a diverse team of people, men and women, that are clear on what you're looking to do next. And to do that effectively, you have to be very clear on what you want to do. And the one thing I always say, I'm not a coach, but I've used a lot of coaches, that if you're not sure what you want to do, don't use your mentoring time to work with someone and say, I'm just not sure what to do. What do you think I should do? People don't have time for that. But coaches do, and so you really hiring some help to get crystal clear on what you want to do next, so that when you do have the opportunity to sit down with people above you or around you in your environment that can act as sponsors, that you go to them with a clear goal of what you're trying to do so that they can help you. Okay, and I really think this is one thing for professional women that they have to spend more time on, is building a network of people around them professionally to help them advance to the next step. And a lot of times it could be your manager, but oftentimes it's a group of people, because sometimes the opportunity is not straight up. You have to go diagonal and in, and those require other people in your network to help you do that, and building that out. And that's why social media is so important in LinkedIn, because you can develop some really key relationships that would be difficult to access without those tools. So that's a whole other hour I will not go into right now. But just let you know, there's plenty of information on my site and YouTube channel, and if you can always call us and ask to help. So we've covered a lot of information today. None of this, all the things we talked about all day from this morning with the panel, which was so awesome, is really thinking, taking a few things away from today, just a few things that you're maybe going to do a little bit differently than when you arrived. And so I just want to see if there's, just ask a few of you, I have a couple more charms, to just share what you're going to take with you. What is something you're going to do differently after you leave today that maybe you didn't think of when you were driving over here? Okay? So just a couple people. I'll come down, yes.
If your list is so full, just try to take off something from your list, to achieve your goals more, and then to take some more time to spend for yourself.
Right, so if your list is so long, just start by just trying a few things you can take off your list so that you have a little bit more time for yourself so you can sharpen the saw. Yes, I'll go way in the back. Yes, in the green coat. Oh, I'm sorry, what color is it? Did you tell me what color? Oh, I thought you said no, it's a different color. I love that too, and I've had other people use that too, and I use it at work all the time. And I use it to set goals with my teams and my executives, and it really helps everyone get on the same page in a really easy way. So, yay! Excited about that. There you go.
Thank you.
Since I'm in the back, anyone else in the back? Yes.
I think it'd be easier to say no if you offer up an alternative.
Yes, so it's easier to say no if you offer up an alternative, okay? And maybe just readjusting the ask. Breaking it up into smaller subsets, like, oh, I could do this, and maybe somebody could do that, and maybe just taking a fraction of it. But make sure you take something you enjoy doing, right? Okay. Whew. Come in the back, yes?
I really liked your idea about, really seeing what you want to focus on for the next, 12 months, and then critically thinking about, what you've taken on and why.
Yes.
That's just makes so much sense, but it just really helped me.
Oh, great. So she said just critically focusing on a few things you want to focus on over the next 12 months. So just having that so that you're focusing on the right things. Because I don't know about you, 3 years out, 5 years out, that's a long time. I might not even be here.
I'm going to live with the more I say yes, the less joy I get. The answer is no.
Did everyone hear that in the back? Yeah? Oh, I'll get your thing. That is so great. Well, I want to just thank all of you. I'll take some questions if you have it. There's some books here. There's more charms if you're interested. But I just want to thank all of you for inviting me and being with me, because I know all of you could be somewhere else right now. So thank you so much. Is there any questions, any comments, thoughts that we didn't capture? No? Well, I hate being between me and food, so we can wrap this up. Thank you. And I knew I wanted to be in business, but I didn't really have real role models that really encouraged me, or we even did college visits or anything like that. And so I asked a couple of the folks when I first arrived, I said, well, what degree gets hired? And they're like, well, all of them. I'm like, no, okay, let me rephrase. What degree makes money when they get hired, in the degree? And they're like, well, I mean, we have this computer thing over there that everybody seems to get hired, and they make, $25,000 or more. I'm like, I'll do it. I was like, that's all I need to hear, because I had waited so many tables and brought so much butter and salt and taken meals back. I was not waiting any more tables. I was like, I did it through college, but I was like, I am going to make money. I don't want to be in a situation where I have to worry about funds all the time. And so I'm going to pick my degree based on the opportunity. And little did I know in the early 90s that computers were going to take off like they have. But it really put me down this trajectory of pursuing a degree that was pretty much male-dominated, which I didn't mind too much because, it didn't seem to be that big of a deal when I was that young. It wasn't really a focal point. But as I got older, I became more aware of it. And I still worked 30, 40 hours while going to school. So it really kept me focused on studying, which was great because it sort of set up my work ethic early on. And I noticed early on that if you work often and you deliver results, people will recommend you. I'm like, well, this is a great concept. And so I was easily appointed for internships, and I received that first job right out of college, which was great. And I traveled around, and it was awesome. My 20s, I traveled all over the world installing LANs and WANs for various companies that were engaging in ERP systems and new wireless systems, which was awesome. And so I moved through my 20s, going to go through this. And so I decided to start a personal journey to figure out, what am I missing? Nobody told me how to manage this all, and it wasn't that easy, and I wasn't even that good at it, because the more times I said yes, the more exhausted I became, and I really didn't even like myself. And honestly, looking back at the people I surrounded myself at that point, they didn't really like themselves either, and so we were all kind of negative Nancys together. And so it just was a really personal time where I just started asking people, and once I started asking women, I'm like, this is happening to me. Is this happening to you? I mean, they looked at me like, duh. And I'm like, okay, what do you do about it? And so I started these conversations with women. I mean, I would start them in airports, in cabs, right? I'd start them in ladies' rooms, in conference rooms. I mean, I worked mostly with men. I work out of Silicon Valley the last 12 years of my career, so it's mostly all men. But once in a while, I'd get in touch with different women. I would start asking them questions. And then as I started asking women questions, it would just, it'd start off around the idea like, oh, it's fine. I'm like, really? Because I don't think it's fine. You can say it's fine, but I don't think it's fine. And then you'd ask them some questions. Well, how did you get over your first obstacle? Or what happens when you have to be at home and be at work? What do you do? And you start the questions. And then, oh my goodness, the floodgates would open and they would just start talking. And then I would schedule 30 minutes with them and we'd be still on the phone an hour and a half later. And I just realized that not a lot of people ask women, how are you doing this? Because I don't really know how to do this. And once you start asking them little questions here and there, it really starts to unfold. And so the Working Woman's GPS is a collection of stories, assessments, energizers that I gathered from all of these interviews. And what I'm going to share with you today are 2 specific assessments with the time allotted that we could go through that. And so keeping a short list of things that sort of pop up while you're here, because oftentimes those are indicators of things that you might want to look at over the next 30, 60 days, and keeping those notes. And I've seen many people jot things down on their paper. So hopefully you'll prioritize and take 1 or 2 things away from you today when you leave after lunch that maybe you didn't think about doing when you first got here. So I really encourage you to participate in some of the assessments that we're going to do today. I actually started my own personal journey of interviewing successful people, most of which are women, over the last 5 years. And that really took me down a completely different trajectory than I had planned, and really launched some of the books and webinars and videos that I do. And we're going to go through a couple assessments here today, but I just wanted to back up just a little bit, because I did not always, aspire to be right here, right now, but a series of events have happened that sort of have pushed me along the way. And when I was little, when I was about 12, it sort of dawned on me I wanted to have a birthday party. And most kids at 12 have a birthday party. They have pizza and makeup and all that stuff. But when I asked my parents for a birthday party, they said, well, we'd love to have a birthday party for you, but we really just don't have the money to have a birthday party for you. And at 12 years old, I really didn't understand about money and how things worked, and I really didn't know what that meant, but I knew for sure that I was going to make some money. because it didn't really feel so good. I'm not having any money. And so, at 12 is when I really started my own journey of working. I started mowing lawns and raking leaves and doing anything I could do just around my neighborhood, which then evolved into working at the bakery at Tops, and then I worked in retail at the Gap for 6 years, and then I started waiting tables. And it was just an entire process of getting out and working and making some money. So when I arrived at college, they asked me what I wanted to do for a degree. Pretty successfully, I was sort of checking the boxes of society of what I needed to do. And then as I moved into my 30s and started making more life decisions, those little things that you say yes to? Those little teeny things like, yes, I will marry you. Yes, we can have some kids. Yes, we can buy a house. I didn't really realize it at the time, but all those little yeses added up to a ton of responsibility, okay? And, I didn't really think about this because when you think about it as a girl, they tell you, okay, get your degree, get married, have kids, buy a house, get a car, do community service, be skinny, be happy. I was trying to do all these things. And the more I said yes and the more things I did, and I thought I was checking all the boxes that society was expecting of me, I was really exhausted. And what I had known to that point was if I keep working really hard, people will notice, and I can push through this. I can just keep pushing and pushing. Well, I was pushing myself right into a hole, and not one that anyone ever talked about, right? No one really talks about, so being up past midnight is fun when you're out with your friends, but if you do it continuously night after night because you have work responsibilities and home responsibilities, it's not that fun. It's not that fun. And so I had this, in my mid-30s, I just was, unloading the dishwasher thinking, this is not what I expected. This is not what I expected. This is so hard. This is so hard. I could feel the tears, right, coming down my cheeks saying, did I miss the Cliff Notes? This cannot be happening everywhere. Why are we doing this? This is not fair. And I'm looking across, I see my daughter, I'm like, gosh, I can't do this for her. If I'm going through this, she...
I now have the pleasure of introducing our keynote, JJ DiGeronimo. She's a tech executive, author, speaker, and businesswoman. She provides career and leadership strategies for high-impact women to effectively prioritize, align, and achieve their desired goals. She is the founder and CEO of Powerfull Woman and Tech Savvy Woman. She is the author of highly sought-after books for women, The Working Woman's GPS, Before You Say Yes. She also co-authored The Confident Woman, Tapping Into Your Inner Power. She's a global spokeswoman for women leaders, women in technology, women entrepreneurs, and young women in science, technology, engineering, and math. Her full bio can be found at purposefullwoman.com. It's a great pleasure I introduce JJ DiGeronimo.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. So thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. But I first want to thank RIT and Dana and all of the committee that has made this possible. Did they not do an amazing job? Such a good day. And I also want to thank all of you, because just chatting with some of the women here today, I know that many of you had second-guessed whether or not you were going to come, right? Some of you had got to-dos last night. Some of you got some additional to-dos while you were sleeping. And I'm sure some of you even thought this morning, do I even have time for this? Now, you don't have to raise your hand, but I know you're out there because I've talked to a couple of you. So I want to give you a round of applause just for showing up. Really. This does not happen that often where you get the opportunity to sharpen your own saw and really come and start thinking about not only what is happening up here in the breakouts, but also what are you thinking? What things are coming to mind for you? Where are areas you need to focus that maybe you have put aside or pushed in the back?